Hey friends, yesterday somebody asked about wanting to hear more thoughts on revamping older work and updating it so that it stays relevant. And I guess I'll just talk more broadly about how I think about my work and what I've written and all that stuff. So let's go. I have been blogging for a pretty long time. I started when I was a teenager at like 13. Let's just say it was all junk until I was about 17 when I started taking it more seriously. And there's a lot of stuff. I didn't have a coherent plan at the start, and I don't think it's necessary to have a coherent plan. I think it's, in fact, well, for my personal style at least, trying to have, I like exploring, trying different things. You know, you don't know what your voice is when you're starting out. You don't know what your priorities are when you're starting out. You're kind of just doing trial and error. That's how it is for me. And I just kept doing that. I didn't have a, you know, I, on retrospect, I wish I had been a little bit more um, judicious about how I did my categorizing and tagging. But that I say that with the benefit of hindsight. I don't know if at the time when I started I could have categorized my work very well. And so thinking about it now, that might be slightly premature optimization. I would say optimize for producing as much output as you can early on when you're starting out, because it's like the parable of the pottery class, right? Which is that the more stuff you make, the better you get a sense of what is good. And so it's better to make lots of things and develop your sense of what is good over time, rather than fixate and obsess about trying to make one good thing before you've developed your sense of what good is. That said, right now where I am in my journey as a creator, as an author, writer, tweeter, vlogger, right? I have tons of material, more material than I even can remember. Right, I have like over 1,000 blog posts and over 100,000 tweets, and I feel like at this point I have written about everything I can think of. I'm sure there's stuff I haven't written about yet, and there's stuff I want to write about, and there's also stuff that I forget that I've written about already, and so there will be repeat work. I will be repeating myself. But I do think that repetition is a good thing. I don't think it is bad to. I mean, okay, so I get frustrated when I find myself kind of walking the same ground over and over again, and that's when I started developing habits like my Twitter threads, where I would search for keywords and I would search for things that I had written about before. So I have like a thread on project management. I have so many threads about so many things, but yeah, I find that threading in general is a solution to the problem of fragmentation, which is that there's so much stuff all over the place, and connecting things to each other is a way of making some sense, some order out of chaos. And repurposing and updating old work to keep it relevant. Not all my stuff is relevant. There's some stuff that I have this whole. I exported my entire blog at some point from visaganv.com/blog. I exported the whole thing to visaganv.com/archives, which I hardly ever access. But if I want to go back and trawl through my archives, I can, because it's there, which is cool. At some point in my journey, I deleted a bunch of stuff, and I regret that because I wish I could revisit it now, but I can't because it's gone. And yeah, that makes me really sad, and I recommend against doing that. I mean, you may have some good reason for deleting something, but you can always just export it and save the export file somewhere and not look at it for years if you want to, and then revisit it afterwards if you do want to. I do find that there's often this kind of meta value in re-examining your old stuff, because you might have been trying to write about something, and there may have been flaws in your thinking. There may have been assumptions that you had not thought to question, that you might not even have been aware of, that when you revisit your old stuff, it may jump out at you. And that, those sort of assumptions that you make and then you subsequently discover and revisit, I find that that's the source of like the most interesting insights. I've had young people come up to me in my DMs and stuff and ask me to check out their blogs, and it's kind of cute how I think everybody starts out with a similar-ish set of curiosities and questions and things that they want to explore. And I've seen at this point, I've seen like a dozen people who are all kind of blogging about the same things. And I don't think that's a bad thing either. I think, you kind of have to go through your early stages of working through whatever big questions you want to go through. What am I doing in my life? What are my priorities? What am I passionate about? And there are some common things that people tend to say. I want the world to be a better place. I want to work on social problems. I want like all of those things. And to get to a point where you start to produce interesting work, and you kind of have to revisit and rework and find the things that are like, find the little points that are quite unique to your perspective. And that's where revisiting and reworking really helps a lot. And yeah, that's I don't know if that answers the question. How to keep things relevant? I mean, you gotta. I don't know if trying to be relevant is a healthy or useful directive, because what does relevant really mean, right? Like it's relevant to the times. It happens to be kind of timely, right? I wouldn't worry too much about that. I guess you wanna have a sense of what your curiosities are. You wanna have a sense of what your priorities are, what interests you, and that's something that will change over time. You may lose interest in some things. You may rediscover renewed interest in old things. So you want to always be kind of revisiting and rescanning all your material. And once you have too much material, you can never scan all of it. But it helps to summarize your own work as much as possible as well. When you get past a certain threshold, I think once you've written like I think by the time you've written 100 blog posts, going back to read all 100 blog posts is going to be kind of frustrating. So maybe about every 15 to 20 blog posts or so, it's worth kind of scanning through everything and doing like a self summary, self review, self report. Right? You might do this once a month, maybe. I have been finding it useful to do a monthly review of what I wrote that month or what I accomplished that month. It's just nice to look back, and then at the end of the year you have like a review of everything you did that year. I find that to be motivating. Once you've started doing it a couple of months, you start to even anticipate that you have choices of what you want to do this week, this day. And I do find that I slightly am likelier to prioritize doing interesting and cool things that might be a little bit tedious or annoying otherwise, because I want to look back on it in my review. And that's great, right? That's using a certain project management skill or a certain device, right? A tool to get you to nudge yourself in the direction that you want to be nudged. That's useful. Do lots of summaries. Do talk about your work with people. I think that's super super useful. I spent a lot of time writing in a vacuum, which has pros and cons. It did give me a very refined sense of my own voice, and I got very comfortable doing that, and I feel like it was helpful. And for my context, I used to do like very public facing political blogging about local news and stuff, and that kind of had me overexposed to the public and kind of obsessing about how the public would respond to things, and I felt like that was unhealthy, so I wanted to do something different from that, and so I did the opposite and wrote in isolation. But I think generally speaking, if you're not sure what to write, if you're not sure what to do, it's useful to have conversations with people and then write about those conversations, especially if you've had the same conversation with more than a couple of people. Then I recommend writing it as if you were having a conversation with somebody else, right? Like you're writing a letter to someone else. I find that constraint of thinking about someone in mind specifically that you want to guide through your thoughts. It has a very strong clarifying vibe, clarifying effect. And yeah, I guess I think of my body of work ideally as a sort of mapped out conversation space. It's an idea play space, and it's stuff that I've talked about with people, and stuff that I want to talk about with people, and stuff that I want people to talk to me about. And as long as I continue to do that, if I've had recurring thoughts over the years, and I've written multiple blog posts about the same things sometimes, it's helpful for me to have like, oh, in 2015 I wrote this, in 2017 I wrote this, in 2019 I wrote this, and here are the common themes in all of those things, and here's what small thing changed along the way, here's what has remained constant. Like, these things add value and insight and perspective to my writing, and so that's what works for me. I hope that helps, and done. Cheers.